Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter, and with me today is the dancer, Courtney Stewart. Courtney, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Last time we had Chris Mowdy on, there was a delay at the end, and his camera was still on, and so he just started dancing. And so, of course, we were trying to take bets on whether or not Courtney could dance. She goes, "I totally dance." I was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." And then just during the whole music, she was just going at it. I was like, is there a record button on
Dun,
here?
dun,
This is
dun,
this is
dun, dun,
this is
dun, dun, dun.
blackmail material.
Oh no.
So we've actually got a lot of really cool stuff going on today that I want to talk to you about. Courtney, who's our guest today?
Christopher Mock.
Wha-
Is that how you say your
who?
last name?
What? Excuse? Whoa, no, no. Okay, it's been a good show, guys. Thank you all so much for coming. Bye.
Oh no.
See you all later. You can handle the
Poor
show,
sport.
Courtney. I'm not
Oh.
gonna. It's not. I'm just not gonna be on.
Just you and me, Chris.
I'm,
We
I'm
can just
gonna,
have the
You owe me
psychologist talk.
$400
It's
for
okay.
this. I
okay, who blabbed? Who
Um,
blabbed? I want to know who's been talking to him.
went to your
Um,
tailor. I went to your tailor.
You went to my tailor, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
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 I'm,
Apparently,
I'm,
we're
I'm,
about the same size.
I'm gonna have. Well, only from the waist up, I would imagine. But at any rate, I am gonna talk to Agrippa, but we'll
Oh no.
so
That's great.
It's fucking
yeah,
nice.
yeah, great special show. We did want to have Ethan just come in and drop by and say hi, but apparently he decided he's going to get into it with uncivil law. So they're still going at it on their channel. Uncivil law is a very bright guy, conservative, very bright guy. Ethan is a very bright guy, liberal. It's been a long show. So wish the two of them over there well. So but we're gonna have a show. We're gonna talk about. Christopher had come across an article that he thought merited discussion for a lot of reasons. I very much concurred. So we're gonna have him on. He's gonna go over that article. We're gonna discuss it. We have a poll. We're gonna poll people both before and after. And then actually, I think we're gonna try to really go for only about an hour, and then we're gonna move the discussion into the Discord. We'll be dropping the links. Links are usually also in the description too, so there'll be links. Chris and I will both be in there. Hopefully, Courtney can make it if she can figure out the phone. I keep telling her it's the on button, but and then I guess I'm in a mood today. Sorry, everybody needs to watch out. So.
I'm gonna let my cat take over.
Well,
Who's gonna take over?
She's literally been trying for like months now to get her cat to be like registered as a co-host, and she keeps trying to get the cat
She's
on and be like, well,
fine.
this would be a great co-host.
I
And
think it's a great
I
idea.
didn't like that.
okay. You're not. This isn't what we would call positive contribution, Chris. And I think we need to.
I'm just saying, I'm a cat guy. Can I get my cat as a co-host? I have two of them. We can have two more co-hosts.
Yeah. Well, so I am sorry if I get a little snippy. I'm in a bit of a mood. My wife earlier we got into a bit of an argument. She said, "Fine, with an attitude like that, you can untie yourself." So I'm going to try. We're going to try to do a good show anyway. We do have. So let me. The topic is going to be social justice and free speech, and I think that's a very interesting topic. There's a tension there I think people haven't realized, and this is a very good article on it. So I'm going to put up the poll right now, and people can. Let's see. No, it actually didn't. For whatever reason, it didn't come up. So it was up to. What is it that they say? Whatever works in whatever works in theory won't work in testing. Whatever works in testing won't work in practice. Let's try this one more time. Oh, there it is. Poll's in the wrong spot.
I've never heard that.
It'll move. The poll. We'll move the poll when this starts, but the poll is up there. And just to read the poll so that everyone knows ahead of time. Who is right? 1, Nick is right. 2, Courtney is wrong.
Please.
Oh, wait. Was this the poll I meant to? I don't know how this poll.
I don't think that's the right poll. Nick.
I think it's the right poll. It sounds like the right poll to me.
It's concerning that he actually made it.
I didn't.
No,
I don't know how that.
ready to go.
I don't know
Like
how
it's
that.
a real. It's premeditated.
Okay. Look, it was a typo. Okay, I just. Wow, the harshness of the
geez.
crowd tonight.
Typo.
And we're 10 minutes into the show, and Mr. Mowdy is already talking about his ass. I think this is just going to be a great show.
So I'm going to change channels real quick. I got a chance to watch one of your debates earlier today, Nick.
One of my debates, and I think I may have screwed up, and maybe the sounds double up, but I'll try to fix that. You got to watch one of my debates?
Yeah. Oh, well, no, that's right. Yeah, so I watched one of your debates, and I think that you lost the debate because it was about atheism or it was about whether we still need Christianity, and you were promoting the anti-theist position or the atheist position.
Yes,
and I think you did us a disservice because we're anti-violence, and you killed the person that you were debating.
Yeah, that was
a mess. It was a mess.
That was the S.J. Thomason debate. That's one of the ones that people are aware. That was and S.J. Was great for having the debate with me. We had known each other for about 2 or 3 years, and there had always been talk of debate, and we finally did it. And it was one of my first debates, like quote professional debates out of the gate. And I think there were a lot of unanswered questions, and I think the debate did not add clarity to those answers, but it did add clarity to the fact that there were some questions. So, but
and admittedly, your opponent took it very gracefully.
Yes, she did.
She was very yeah. It was a civil debate. But I mean, as far as points being made and counterpoints, I mean, it was just you pulled apart the argument that she was making. Very well prepared. You were super prepared.
Thank you. Yeah, like about 2 weeks for that one and a lot of reading, but I think it was worth it, and it was a debate that I mean people wanted to hear and I wanted to participate in. So she was very graceful about it. We continued chatting for a couple of weeks afterwards, so it was very good, and I hope she's doing well, and I still see her around the community, so that's going good. But and on occasion making waves, which she's been known to do. But then again,
maybe
I wouldn't know anything about making waves. I'm just saying.
We should put a link to that in the show.
Oh, that's a really good idea. I will. You know what? I will update that. Since we brought it up. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And I do want to get back to debating when I have time. So 7 or 8 decades from now. All right. So here comes the cat. $50 says here comes the cat. So the poll question. Nothing. Try not to give you any ideas. The poll question, can calls for social justice stifle free speech? And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the poll up. With any luck, this time it'll be the right poll. I don't know how that last one came up. We're going to look into that. Somebody, I think it was a practical joke, left it in our system. Disgruntled employee. We're going to look into that for you, Courtney. She's instilled with loads of confidence. So there's the poll. One for, and this will just update in real time in the for once something in this show on time and in time. It's amazing. Vote 1, yes. Calls for social justice can diminish free speech. Vote 2, no, it doesn't. 3, yes, it does, but it's not a problem or it's worth it. And we will tally up the results. We will close the poll right before we start the discussion, and then we will open up the poll again, refresh the results, and see what people are thinking. So if that sounds good to everybody else, Mr. Mowdy, the floor is yours.
Yes. All right. Well, I like that you're having a much more interactive kind of show tonight. That's awesome. Like, I love that. I love the fact that we're having a poll and people are going to be able to get a baseline. We can get a baseline feel for people's position at the beginning of this article, and then we want to do that poll afterwards to see if anyone's position had shifted. So this is going to be. I like this. I like this interactive component. But this is a short article. If you don't mind, I'm going to put my radio voice on, and I'm just going to read it. It's like 4 paragraphs. I'll try not to make it overly dramatic, but come on, I got to have some fun here. All right, so Harper's Magazine, this was published on July 7th of this year, and this is a letter on justice and open debate. Our cultural, I feel like I want to put reverb on. Hold on a second.
Is he? Oh dear Lord.
Oh yeah. Now do I have some reverb?
Oh, that sounds so cool.
In a world,
I like it,
where there's a letter on justice and open debate on Harper's Magazine. All right, enough of that. So let's just get through this. Let's see what points are being made.
Yeah,
and,
I was about to point out you're not the only one with a
author.
mixer. And since your
What's
sound
that?
comes, I said I was about to point out you're not the only one with a mixer, and since your sound has to go through my board before going out there, just wanted to bring that up real quick. But please continue. I'm sorry. I was looking for my Daffy Duck.
For now, boys.
I was looking for the Daffy Duck filter there, but I couldn't find it. But please continue.
Oh, that would be awesome if you had pitch shift on that. Make me sound like I'm talking through helium. All right. So as you notice, there isn't an author on this particular article, this particular letter, because at the bottom it is signed by a bunch of different people. So without seeing who promotes this or who buys into this letter, I kind of want to get your guys' feel for what you think of what's about to be said. Okay, so remember the polls are open, right, Nick?
Yeah, they are.
Okay. So as I'm reading this, please make a rating on the polls. So our cultural institutions are facing a moment of trial. Powerful protests for racial and social justice are leading to overdue demands for police reform, along with wider calls for greater equality and inclusion across our society, not least in higher education, journalism, philanthropy, and the arts. But this needed reckoning has also intensified a new set of moral attitudes and political commitments that tend to weaken our norms of open debate and toleration of differences in favor of ideological conformity. As we applaud the first development, we also raise our voices against the second. The forces of illiberalism are gaining strength throughout the world and have a powerful ally in Donald Trump, who represents a real threat to democracy. But resistance must not be allowed to harden into its own brand of dogma or coercion, which right-wing demagogues are readily exploiting. The democratic inclusion we want can be achieved only if we speak out against the intolerant climate that has set in on all sides. The free exchange of information and ideas, the lifeblood of a liberal society, is daily becoming more constricted. While we have come to expect this on the radical right, censoriousness, spit that word out real quick, censoriousness is also spreading more widely in our culture. An intolerance of opposing views, a vogue for public shaming and ostracism, and the tendency to dissolve complex policy issues into a blinding moral certainty. We uphold the value of robust and even caustic counterspeech from all quarters. But it is now all too common to hear calls for swift and severe retribution in response to perceived transgressions of speech and thought. More troubling still, institutional leaders, in a spirit of panicked damage control, are delivering hasty and disproportionate punishments instead of considering reforms. Editors are fired for running controversial pieces. Books are withdrawn for alleged inauthenticity. Journalists are barred from writing on certain topics. Professors are investigated for quoting works of literature in class. God forbid. A researcher is fired for circulating a peer-reviewed academic study, and the heads of organizations are ousted for what are sometimes just clumsy mistakes. Whatever the arguments around each particular incident, the result has been to steadily narrow the boundaries of what can be said without the threat of reprisal. We are already paying the price in greater risk aversion among writers, artists, and journalists who fear for their livelihoods if they depart from the consensus or even lack sufficient zeal in agreement. This stifling atmosphere will ultimately harm the most vital causes of our time. The restriction of debate, whether by a repressive government or an intolerant society, invariably hurts those who lack power and makes everyone less capable of democratic participation. The way to defeat bad ideas is by exposure, argument, and persuasion, not by trying to silence or wish them away. We refuse any false choice between justice and freedom. which cannot exist without each other. As writers, we need a culture that leaves us room for experimentation, risk-taking, and even mistakes. We need to preserve the possibility of good faith disagreement without dire professional consequences. If we don't defend the very thing on which our work depends, we shouldn't expect the public or the state to defend it for us. All right. And then below that, that's the whole thing. And then below that are the signatures, but I don't really want to show that yet. So that's the letter. It's just those 3 paragraphs. So I made a little PowerPoint kind of, what's the word I want to use? Condensing the points that were made into just some like pithy little bumper sticker slides that we can discuss. And I admittedly paraphrased some of it just so that I could fit more information on a slide without having to ellipse the hell out of everything, trying to quote it. So I think that, the main quote that absolutely is the take home point is this quote right here on the slide. We refuse any false choice between justice and freedom, which cannot exist without each other. So that is the take home point. So let's start there. Is it the case that justice and freedom cannot exist without each other? I think that's the first thing we kind of need to chew on before we move on with what they consider the problem is, what the risks of that problem are, what the potential solutions are. So what do you guys think? Do you think that justice and freedom can't exist without each other? Or do you think you can have freedom without justice? Or you can have justice without freedom?
That's a really good question. I'll let Courtney dive into that. I'm also going to see if if the poll is slowed down, I could start a second poll on that question as we discuss it. But we have 3 people. I'll leave this poll open for another couple of minutes. Question: Can calls for social justice diminish free speech? Vote 1 for yes, vote 2 for no, vote 3 for yes, but it's not a problem and or it's worth it. Courtney, what do you think about his question?
I thought that the paper made some really good points. I worry about the perception that a fight for social justice necessarily has this issue. I think that there's like an overlay of this kind of cancel culture thing that can be really toxic and can be like more benign than it's characterized, I think. It depends on how it's used and the consequences of that. But justice and freedom needing to come together, I would assume. I mean, justice and freedom, we would have to kind of define what we mean by them, I guess. But in the basic basis of that, it makes sense.
Just like the top line of it, without getting too deep, because I'm not a political scientist, and I don't really have the education to weigh in heavily on this. But I mean, just at its surface, right? Freedom without justice would be anarchy, right? Is that a fair kind of ballpark assessment? And justice without freedom would be a benevolent dictatorship, kind of. Like I'm just kind of painting prototypical examples of what one would look like without the other.
Which seems to suggest that you could have them. You just might not want to live in that society, but ostensibly it would be doable. I mean, we've seen anarchistic societies. We have people who advocate for anarchistic societies and benevolent dictatorships. We've seen ones that at least claim to be benevolent and or who think that at least their methods are necessarily the only means that they can operate. I do think at each end is really
and
much
the problem
more of a
with benevolent dictators is that they die, right?
Yes, yeah. Well,
I think there's no guarantee that whoever takes the reins is going to be benevolent as the previous one.
That's very true.
And I also think that it's similar to the debate between security and privacy that we've had for a long time. And so I feel like it's similar, of these large questions of how much of one should we give time to versus the other, kind of, or how much should one take over the other. But I think in this way, like the privacy versus safety is kind of on a spectrum between the two extremes. But justice and freedom, I don't think you can have one without the other.
It doesn't.
So it's almost like they have to come together.
I think there's a built-in inference here of preference, right? They can exist together for the kind of society that we want, for the kind of values that we promote, right? So that's kind of baked into this assumption that we need to balance the two of them, and both of them need to exist. At least that's, maybe I'm reading into it, but it just seems like that's a baked-in implicit assumption of a statement like that.
I think you're
correct. I mean, I just feel like sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think there's another problem, and it may seem like I'm taking the analogy just a little too far and going too far with it, but I'm not convinced I am, because I think there are consequences for this discussion. But the thing is, okay, let's assume you had absolutely zero freedom. The only possible justice would be to not punish you for anything. You couldn't have justice because you don't have the ability to make choice. Justice is consequences for choices. So if there is zero freedom, what would justice be? Because you're not responsible even for your own actions. Now, it seems like I'm taking it to a huge extreme, because you're saying, like, okay, we're not really going to talk.
No, because you just said something that kind of like not having freedom would be an injustice. The way that the way that we're currently thinking about it,
Yep. It would be its own. First of all, I think whoever took away that freedom would be committing an injustice upon you, and I think you could no longer be held accountable
based on our current understanding of human rights.
Yes,
which in itself is a bit arbitrary.
I think that's a fair, very complicated point.
Okay. I'm not opening that can of worms necessarily, but I just kind of want to put that the way that we value human rights, freedom seems to be an inherent thing that we should get from nature, even though there's no natural law saying that we should, right?
All right,
but that's how we're interpreting natural law at this point in history.
New poll. Did Christopher Mowdy just say on air that he thought it was unnatural for human beings to have human rights? 1 for yes, 2 for, well, it's not a no.
That's ridiculous.
It's
not that I said it. It's just that I didn't not say it.
Here we go. Okay, here we go. Somebody commented. They're like, it looks like Nick and Chris are actually kind of getting along. I'm starting to understand why. It's not that I said
because we're both full of shit.
Yeah, that was. And except one of us has a little more discretion than the other one. Let's get back on. Yeah, actually, I don't think I'd usually be accused of that, but let's continue anyway.
All right. So, do we have anyone? Do we have anyone on the outside on the chat that wants to chime in on this particular topic before we move on?
Now, we've been bringing in a few. So we brought in. I did like this one. This is Michael Westby. This may be a little too small. Maybe I'm going to have to make these bigger. I wanted them so that they don't overwhelm the screen there. But he said, Michael Westby says, cancel culture is bad, unless I agree with it. Which I think is kind of exactly, and that's
the point.
Yeah, right? I think
it kind of is like he's making a joke, but guess what? That hits a couple of the layers that are important, right? Free speech isn't free if you can't disagree with the consensus.
Yep.
Right.
And I think that's I think that it. Let's see. Arguments against free speech fold onto themselves when they're taken to an extreme in a way that Mike kind of hit on the nose, right? I like free speech unless it's the free speech that I don't like. Yep. I like free speech unless you're disagreeing with me and I'm in the majority. I like free speech except...
So there is, I think among YouTubers especially, cancel culture is a very volatile subject and idea for them. And I think there's a level of cancel culture that is understandable in terms of like holding R. Kelly accountable, things like that. To me, that's when I was first introduced to that idea. That's what it was for, is to limit the power of certain people who are making really horrible choices and affecting people in a very negative way. And so there's that version of cancel culture where you're trying to help people vote with their dollar on what they consume because of the lack of morality in what they consume. But cancel culture now is kind of taking this line of there being these really harsh consequences for things that may not fit the crime. And so that's really hard. And the mob mentality that comes with social media is part of that issue, that like there are ways that people are affected that are an equivalent of something that should be decided by like a jury of their peers in a serious way, and not by a bunch of angry people who are behind an anonymous screen. And so that's really the other end of that danger. So I'm not really sure how this quote applies to that subject. So maybe you can kind of, I mean, we heard the whole paper, but I don't remember
I hear
where this came out of
let's
it.
hold the cancel culture discussion, because I think that this taps directly onto that. And I wish Prolib was here, because I think that he just had a hang about this just the other day, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
he's
busy arguing with some conservative guy who really shouldn't be on YouTube anyway. But yeah.
Get out of here with that noise.
He had on civil law. It was a really good show. We had to bail early, but hopefully it was doing. They were having a great discussion actually. Yeah, and we had on civil law on. It was clear everyone there disagreed when he came on our show, but it was really great. And glad we had him on. So we're looking at.
All right, so let's get through the. I only have like 6 or 7 slides, so let's quick get through these and the summarized points on them, and then let's kind of synthesize it into this cancel culture kind of discussion, because I think that has a couple of layers that are just a little too deep for right now. But in like 15 minutes, I think that would be the perfect time to dip into them.
Let me add one more though, because you had asked about what were they saying, and I feel like I should know this, and maybe it'll be refreshed, and maybe we can bring it up earlier. But Mr. Westby also said Colin Kaepernick was a victim of cancel culture. Oh yeah, there was a victim of cancel culture that detractors always forget about, Colin Kaepernick, and the name sounds familiar, but I don't know. But we can hit on that. But you had asked, and so I said,
it's the football player that took the knee.
Oh, yes,
during the national anthem.
Of course. All right. I knew that one. All right. So we'll hit that up in a few. But thank you, Michael.
So as the author or authors of this letter are trying to frame the problem, I kind of paraphrased it on this slide. So as we applaud powerful protests for racial and social justice leading to overdue demands, we also raise our voices against the intensified set of moral attitudes and political commitments that tend to weaken our norms of open debate and toleration of differences in favor of ideological conformity. So this kind of goes into what you were saying a second ago, Courtney, at least the way that I'm reading it, this mob mentality, right? It seems to be addressing the idea that, here's how I'm understanding it. There is a valid point for everybody to rally around, but there is a threshold of there's a threshold of how the protests can move forward productively, and past that threshold, it becomes mob mentality, where it's just like the slightest infraction against an ideology all of a sudden makes you a sinner in an environment where there is no forgiveness. Right? This is the call out culture kind of thing, where we're going to get you fired if 20 years ago you tweeted something we don't like. Right? We're going to get, if you're a public broadcaster, we're going to get people we're going to get your advertisers to not, to pull from your show if you say things that we don't like, or if we find out that X, Y, or Z thing that you did so long ago has come to the forefront, right? So like, who's the comedian that got canceled from the Oscars? Kevin Hart, right? Kevin Hart was set to host, I think it was the Oscars. And then they dug up a tweet from however long ago where he said something disparaging about homosexuals, and then he was canceled from his dream gig, right? So I think that, I don't know, I've said enough. Let me hear what you guys think.
I do think that I had forgotten about the Kevin Hart one, and he is hilarious. He is immensely talented, and it's funny too because especially comedians I think suffer this in particular too, because sometimes a joke can be in bad taste, and the question is, okay, well, comedians are, that's a good comedian always has to, at least in my view, be pushing the boundaries of what's acceptable. And I think comedy is often found at a tension between, there aren't very many things that human beings find funny. There really aren't, actually. One of the things that we find funny, and I detest this, but this has been just sort of my view. I haven't read any papers on this, but one of the things I've noticed, the suffering of other people, we find funny. That's why self-deprecating humor, people who sit there and say, oh, God, well, this happened to me and this happened. They say comedy is tragedy from the other side of the street. And, so we do often,
Wow.
and we do.
That's a quote.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate. So the only two things that I can think of that we actually find funny is the suffering of other people. And Christopher Hitchens actually once said this, but he said this half tongue-in-cheek, I think he was trying to gauge the audience. It fell flat. Everyone was like, he can't be serious. I was like, yeah, he's serious. And logical juxtapositions. And if they include the suffering of somebody else, boy, do we love that. That's the old joke of the doctor comes out of the doctor's office, but has to sign a letter. And he says, oh yeah, I just did my physical on the patient. He's good. Everything's fine. It goes to sign a letter, pulls out his thing, goes, wait, if this is the thermometer, where's my pen? Juxtaposition and the suffering of another human being. So you've managed to hit all in one. Now, when you make jokes about minorities, and he may have even also said something offensive, and he may have, by the way, been, and we've brought onto the show, we talk about deconversion stories, and one of them that we had on someone who talked about being, we had a couple actually who talked about being openly homophobic. And I said, listen, I wanted, just hearing that somebody was gay, my blood would boil, and I wanted to, and they talked about their own insecurities, they talked about their own, and how it, and one of them had talked about how he witnessed a beating of a gay man. And it was for something the gay man hadn't even done. It might have been a slight if, and then he's just sitting there going, whoa, this is what happens when I talk about hate, because I was talking to them earlier about how much, I hate hate gay guys. And then they did this. They may or may not have done it if I hadn't, but that's the consequences of this kind of speech. And so he started to reflect, okay, so now he's much more progressive in his thinking. But what happens if somebody hits him up with something he said 10 years ago, and he's like, oh no, this isn't the same guy. It's just, and I'm so sorry for what I did. But and then people want to, and we see that happen too. So I don't know how that fits into, because you had said, it's also, we end up not being very forgiving. We end up being,
I do think that part of the consequence of him using that speech, if that person had used that speech on a platform, part of the backlash is to try and get people to stop doing that, to stop saying hateful things on social media. And so there is a line, I think, between someone being irresponsible with such a public platform that has such a potential for inciting violence versus somebody like the Times being able to speak on controversial things. So that's very two different extremes. One person took an ethics class in journalism and one didn't. You know what I mean? So I think that having a mindfulness of the consequences of your actions in the real world today is a good thing. But I don't know much about how cancel culture happens exactly. I'm not on a lot of those social platforms. But I think that the central effort to educate people on what is acceptable and what isn't in terms of harm of others is one thing, but using it as like political disagreement and these things that aren't, it's, I don't know, that's the thing, is that it's political disagreement can be seen as harmful.
See, I think that's the point. I think that's the point of this letter, right? Like, we can talk about super extreme cases, and I don't think that that's necessarily the target here. I think that the point of the authors is that disagreement, right? Just disagreement with like certain basic ideologies are being treated like a sin that you can't serve penance for, right? And that combined with the cancel culture is the volatility I think that they're addressing, at least from my perspective, from my read, right? Because they're talking about the norms of open debate and toleration of differences. Like, from my perspective, the intellectual commons should allow as horrible of an idea as you could possibly muster. And if you can't support it on its merits, then it'll just go to the intellectual commons to die. Whereas the ideas that thrive in the intellectual commons have enough merit that they can be supported.
Yeah.
So that seems to be like like they almost seem to be talking about radical free speech or free speech absolutism. Even though they don't say that directly, that's well, when you see the authors, you'll see why I think the way that I do. So I think I kind of think that is the direction they're going. But let's move on a little bit. And so they're saying,
people,
okay.
I mean, we have a number in the live chat. Well, let me real quick. I do want to hear what you have to say, but just to remind people, we have a number of people in the live chat, and so we've had only I think 4 or 5 votes yet. I'll check in a second, but we have a poll: is or can the cause of or fighting for social justice stifle free speech? 1 for yes, 2 for no, 3 for yes, but it's worth it. Sorry, Courtney, you were saying?
Well, it's just that I think there's the political disagreement feels like life and death for a lot of people. And so the stakes feel higher. And I think that might be where this cancel culture being applied to political disagreement is happening, where, you know, things like mask wearing in a public place is being politicized. In that way, it is life or death, but there are a lot of things that aren't. And so it's like, you know, you saw this with the feminism movement, and like there being this like arguing of, if you are going to entertain certain ideas, then you are out. And it's like really unnecessarily harsh because of disagreement and civil discourse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, you know, just to recap this, they're just setting the stage, you know, right here, where they're saying, okay, the content of what we're protesting about is legit. But the process has a potential to avalanche. In fact, somebody in the streams mentioned that, and they had a really good point. Let me quick find that. Oh, come on, smart person in the streams. Yeah, Aries 106. If the people who wrote this letter think they can stop the avalanche, they are quite mistaken. I think that they're pointing out that we are mid-avalanche, and I think that they're hoping that there is a potential firewall that prevents it from building up more momentum, because I think that their point is that that momentum is the ideological conformity that they're trying to prevent from encroaching on free speech. That's my take. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. All right, what else I got to say? All right, so here is another problem, right? So that is the context within which free exchange of information and ideas, which they consider the lifeblood of liberal society, and I agree with that, is daily becoming more constricted. So there's the encroachment on the lifeblood of liberal society, which is the free exchange of information. And resistance to the forces of illiberalism must not be allowed to harden into its own branded dogma or coercion. So it does sound, Aries, like they're talking about the avalanche that has already started. And this does very much seem like them trying to stop the avalanche. But illiberalism, that seems to be a buzzword / dog whistle for some people.
I was going to ask you what that means, because I don't know what that means. Illiberalism.
Illiberalism. So the only people I hear use language like that are like, the first time I think I even heard that term was Dave Rubin, if you guys are familiar with him.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah, Dave Rubin, he's a political commentator. He was on the Young Turks, and then he kind of branched out, and now he's part of the intellectual dark web, quote unquote. And it's a way for them to argue against liberals that have gone so extreme that they're not even liberal anymore. They're illiberal. Right? So that's illiberalism. The last time most of the time that I've heard this term, it is a slight against far left liberals. Like, oh, you're not a liberal. Like you are folding liberalism on top of itself such that it's now illiberalism. Yeah. Right? You're taking your virtue and you're making it a vice.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So if that's the problem, then here's the solution. Right? We need to preserve the possibility of good faith disagreement without dire professional consequences. So good faith disagreement, I mean, in the face of somebody whose ideology is radically different from yours, that's very difficult. And I think that it takes more impulse control and delay of gratification and mindfulness in people to follow this recommendation. It's almost unnatural. It's as unnatural as human rights.
Says now that was a callback. All right. That was he gets points. He gets points. And he's earned them because I really hate giving him points. But yeah. Okay.
Oh.
And so the call to arms is, if we don't defend the very thing on which our work depends, we shouldn't expect the public or the state to defend it for us. Now, this seems condescending as fuck to me. I don't know about you, but it's pretty much they're going, it's almost like they're distancing themselves. Like, the example I always use, like they're the oracles of Delphi, right? Like if we don't call out our own and pick ourselves up by our bootstraps, we can't expect the hoi polloi to do it for us, or this crooked government that we're much better than.
Are they referring to themselves as like journalism?
So you'll see, I mean, I'm not giving anything away by saying some of the authors of this are journalists, they're thinkers, they're academics, they're authors, they're speakers. So I think,
what made sense to me, though, is that if you're talking about somebody who is a journalist who abides by journalistic ethics, it's kind of saying like the need for journalistic ethics has gravitated toward people who have nothing to do with journalism because of the way that they behave in social media. And so it's kind of like we need to teach the public and the state what will be better for the country, I guess, or for like ethics, civil discourse, because I mean, again, we don't know who's speaking, but it sounded to me like that like we know that this is really toxic and social media doesn't seem to understand it and the state isn't going to give it to you for free. So you have to like say, this is what we expect, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And of course, earlier in the letter, they mentioned, Donald Trump as like the prototypical example of the illiberalism that they're talking about.
What?
So let me make sure I'm right on that.
No, it's fine. It's just
because I thought that his name was mentioned right after that.
Why
Yeah,
would
the
Trump be
forces of
considered an
illiberalism
extreme
are gaining
liberal?
strength throughout the world and have a powerful ally in Donald Trump.
Well, yeah, well, because his tactics are the same. He may not be a liberal, but his
Yeah,
tactics are
that's
the same.
yeah. I thought that that's what they were meaning is that the extreme left is playing into the hands of the rhetoric of Trump because it's like, look how bad the liberals are. Does that make sense? That's what that said to me.
Yes, I see.
Yeah, it would
Okay,
be
so
kind of
it's not
scary if somebody was
so.
like, oh,
I see. So it's not so much painting Donald Trump
Oh,
as an illiberal, but Donald Trump is a
right.
threat that is using the illiberalism to his advantage.
Yeah, to
Is that
paint
fair?
all of
Okay.
like to paint
well,
like all of progressivism as that.
well, and certainly any minority has that trouble. I mean, if you're gonna, if you know, uh,
Yeah.
if any minority does even the slightest thing wrong, it gets painted as all the minorities are this way, and you can dismiss all of them. So
Yeah.
they have to hold themselves, if they want to be heard, they have to hold themselves to a higher standard than the majority, significantly higher. The bar for Barack Obama for being accepted was 10 times higher. I mean, if Trump were
Mm-hmm.
black, we would never have heard of him. And
Yeah.
if so, I think that yeah, I think that's a really good point, Courtney. I would disagree that that was the point they were making, but I think that that's a valid point in
Okay.
the context of all of this. I think that at a minimum,
Mm.
yes, when liberals start actually, it's almost I don't think they're quite there, but when liberals start using the techniques that presumably they object to, but they say, well, we're using these because the ends justify the means. That's a problem. I will be back in a second,
Are you
folks.
talking about Antifa without saying Antifa?
I
That's what
don't know
walks
too much
away. Man,
about
that
that.
is not a response to a question, Nick. Walk away from the goddamn
Oh
camera.
no.
Jeez, if you don't want to answer, just say so.
Oh geez. So rude.
Just walk the fuck away. Damn. So, hopefully everything's okay.
Yeah, I think that something was ringing. I heard some like interference.
Okay. I'm sure he's busy. So let's move on to the next slide. So the claim of these authors is that the democratic inclusion we want, we, the authors, can be achieved only if we speak out against the intolerant climate that has set in on all sides. And this is kind of where like the philosophical puzzle of like, so every once in a while I like to have a discussion about like trying not to be tribal, right? But the problem with that, and this is an analogy, and the problem with that is after a while, people who are tribal are the other tribe, right? When the point that you're making is you want to be less tribal, right? So
Yeah.
like saying that I want to be less tribal puts me in the tribe of people who want to be less tribal. And for people that don't have that goal, well, they're other. So I've automatically made a tribe out of not wanting to make tribes. To me, that's what this sounds like, because there can come a point where you can be intolerant of intolerance. And I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing.
Yeah.
Except when I think the intolerance, I mean, that drastic philosophical analogy aside, the intolerant climate, how do you change the tides of a climate? Because if it's a climate of intolerance, that means that there's a majority of people. I mean, I infer from that there's a majority of people that are intolerant to the values that these authors, the democratic inclusion that these authors are trying to achieve. Oh, Nick, you're back from your rage quit? Good.
Yeah. Everyone was like, I rage quit. I was like, well, look, only on days that end in Y or with guests that end in Christopher Mowdy.
What do they start with?
A capital C.
So
sorry,
well,
I did miss
agree
part of that. Sorry,
that there is an intolerant climate that is setting in on all sides? I guess that's an important point, because that's what the authors are trying to. I mean, this is they're ramping up. Go ahead.
I really don't. Again, I think I'm outside of the like social media access. I have like Facebook, but that's pretty much it. I don't have any of the platforms that get really, really toxic. And so I can't say. I hear from other people who use those platforms that this is a huge issue. That and it makes sense to me that that will happen, that like tribalism will happen on either side. But I can't say from my experience that I've seen it because it's not something that I am privy to.
But I think that puts you in a unique position because I don't think they're just talking about social
It does.
media bullshit, right? They're talking about how that's spilling
Yeah.
out into the real world. And I think that, if we get to talk about cancel
Yeah.
culture, I would say that that is a manifestation. That would be a manifestation of it. But people are getting fired for, what the editor at New York Times got fired for running that Tom Cotton opinion piece, right? Or he
Yep.
stepped down or what have you. So, I mean, it's not just the social media
Yeah.
side of things.
Well, meaning a lot of the news that you get of like this person was canceled for blah blah blah, like I don't hear that either. I think that's my issue, is I'm not up to date with what's going on even with cancel culture. I have a basis understanding of what it is from secondhand as well. So that's kind of my
the more I
point,
think
is
about
that
it,
I don't
the more
know
I think
that I
about
can
it,
speak
the
to
more I
that.
realize that like that information is online in the social media, really. Like I don't see the, let's see. If you were just to go off of the internet, you would think that everyone's getting canceled. If you were to just go off of mass media, nobody's getting canceled, right? Because it's like two separate worlds. What circulates online doesn't always make it onto mainstream media, for good reason.
Exactly. And I'm not even one to get like news or anything from Facebook either. Like I'm not on Facebook the way that a lot of people are. So that's the thing, is that I use Facebook to talk to people and to share photos and stuff like that, but I don't engage with news feeds and stuff like that. So that's my issue, is that a lot of the times there's all these controversies happening and I have no knowledge of it unless somebody tells me in person, hey, this is happening online,
Well,
But-
and I will, at the risk of getting embroiled in one ourselves, I do think that especially early on, when there was some significant questions about trans athletes in sports, even saying, I'd like to know more about the science behind it. If you didn't say that
Right.
with an implicit suggestion that that the science supports the people who were for complete equality in sports and trans equality, if you didn't suggest that that's where the science was going to go, whether even not knowing where it was going, I think you could get into a lot of trouble. And there were people who also just, there are people who said things that they just shouldn't have said, but even they got sort of like, okay, we're going to cancel these people just for saying something that's uneducated. And I think there are ways to deal with it other than attacking them. And I do get the impression that actually the reason the attacks are so vitriol is because they want to keep people from saying those things. And it may be that those are bad things, and maybe that those things do hurt people. But I think the answer is to educate people and bring them around so that they know, and then they become a partner in it instead of somebody who feels silenced. They feel like they've had their career destroyed because they said something that they really did believe, and maybe even had reason to believe, given how they grew up in their lives, given the information that they had, talked about openly and honestly. What happened was they were shut down, and I think even quite deliberately a little bit of a message sent to other people. If you're going to say something like this, we will make sure you don't get the opportunity to speak again.
Well, and the larger issue with that was that there were people who noticed that they had said something that was uneducated. They educated themselves, they corrected that mistake, and they were still being attacked online by certain groups as being homophobic and having the intent of harming trans people. And so that assumption of intent just based on disagreement, I think, is what part of what this topic is as well.
And I also think that ties into the whole, like, is there an environment for forgiveness, right? Are we just calling out for the sake of pointing out people's sins without giving them a path to redemption?
Right.
Like, shouldn't people be forgiven for mistakes? Shouldn't mistakes be
Right.
recognized as mistakes as compared to patterns of
Mm-hmm.
behavior? Right? Patterns of
Mm-hmm.
behavior are patterns of behavior, right? 3 is the magic number. If we see it 3 times or more, it's a pattern of behavior. If something happened once 20 years ago and you had to dig it up from Twitter, is that the same thing? Or can we admit that that's a mistake,
Yeah.
especially if the person admits that their opinion has evolved since that time and they regret the mistake of tweeting or whatever? Like what level of ingratiation is necessary to be forgiven? And I think that, I wrote a post in Discord today kind of talking about like call out culture. If you're just calling out to bitch at people, to point out how bad they are, that's only half the picture. You also need a call in culture where you call
Yes.
people into a room, have a discussion, and hash things out like adults, right? You disagree without being disagreeable, or you can be disagreeable if that's both of your styles, right? But, call out culture is only half the picture. You need a call in culture so that the person can be heard, the person can hear, and they can make a decision about whether they made a mistake and whether they want to apologize for it. And if they apologize, you accept it as being genuine. Unless, of course, they immediately do the same thing right afterwards, right? But let's assume.
And that attitude of calling out is fuel for the fire of the other side of that political argument, feeling rejected and being further entrenched into bad ideas. Things like, take anti-vaxxers, for example. If you call them out and say you're really stupid for this, then you're further entrenching them into that world, because they feel disrespected, they feel not understood, and not given the time of day to have their concerns voiced and alleviated by actual information.
Well, let me make a quick suggestion here. So, Chris, I don't know how you feel about this, but I want to remind people about the poll, and then maybe do you want to say wrap this up to Discord in about 5 or 10 minutes? Does that sound good to you, or did you want to? How does that?
Let's have that as a plan. And we were worried we weren't going to have enough material to last an hour.
I wasn't worried. I wasn't worried. I said I could turn my mic off, and 20, 30 minutes into it, Christopher was like, "Oh, Nick, what's your opinion? I want to hear your opinion on the following things." And then another 20 minutes later, maybe I could turn my mic on. And we actually had a good point out in the live chat.
This is the voice of God.
Oh God. Okay, I'm getting out my Kermit. I am getting out my Kermit the Frog a voice modulator at this point. So we got Dr. Zayas, who said he gets all his news from In Time. If Nick Souter doesn't say it, it didn't actually happen. I'm going to have a hard time wrapping my head around that one. But I did announce that he's in the live chat, and oh dear.
Wait, does that mean that if you do say it, it did happen?
Well,
that's dangerous.
That would be affirming the consequent. And yes, I agree. No, I agree that that's what it means. I don't know that it's dangerous, but I think if I say it happened, but at any rate,
that's what you're agreeing with.
It is now. I think that's a good. I like this plan. I'm excited to be a part of it. So
this last slide is the
okay. Let's
the last slide is just the solution as I'm understanding the way that the authors are following this, right? The way to defeat bad ideas is by exposure, argument, and persuasion, not by trying to silence or wish them away. And then the last point, and I love, these are my two favorite quotes from the whole letter. We uphold the value of robust and even caustic counter-speech from all quarters. So this kind of buys into the idea I mentioned earlier of the intellectual commons. Everyone's invited, right? Or think of it like the Olympics. Mm-hmm. Hey, man, everyone's invited, but not everyone's going to place, right? Just because you're here doesn't mean you're going to get a gold, silver, or bronze medal, right? Only the ideas that can stand the test of time and, the merit of the argument and can be argued for in such a way that they maintain their status in the intellectual commons. Those are the ones that are going to place silver and bronze medal. All other ideas are just going to go there to die, but they're welcome to come in. I like that. I like the idea. But again, this is like extreme free speech, like free speech absolutism, like all ideas are welcome, no matter how shitty or caustic they are. Because good ideas should be able to be argued in such a way that bad ideas look like bad ideas.
Well, and the other issue is when you look at YouTube, the speech itself isn't the only thing that someone is gaining. If they say something that they know is false and it gains a lot of traction and they earn money because of that traction, then I think that's part of that cancel culture people are talking about, is we need to demonetize this or that so that they're not benefiting from saying something that's knowingly controversial just because it's controversial. Like saying something really hateful or something like that. But I don't quite understand where they're going with the way to defeat bad ideas is by exposure, argument, and persuasion. I'm not sure those are the three things. I feel like it's more
I'm
about
interpreting that as
civil
like welcoming them
discourse,
into the forum.
but I feel like
Is
it
that
seems like coercion, like expose them for bad ideas, argue against them, and persuade people against them. But that means that the person doing that is on the right side of history and has integrity. You know, like I think that that's the concern, is that,
well, what are I
does
mean,
that make
would you
sense?
think that like what are considered good and bad ideas change over time?
Yeah.
Right? Like I mean, 100, 200 years ago, human rights were pretty much the people who thought about human rights were thinking about rich white men, right? And that's how
Yeah.
the Constitution was written, right? Human rights didn't start
Hmm.
involving like black people or women or any of those
Right.
things until
People.
past. So where
Yeah.
we are now and how we understand what is good or bad arguments is very different than it was 200 years ago, and hopefully 200 years from now it'll have evolved further. So I
Right.
think that the good bad distinction is a function of time
Hmm.
to an extent, right? Are there any good
To an
ideas
extent.
that have always been good? Are there any bad ideas that have always been bad?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know the answers to this.
I
Well,
I mean,
we'll tell you what. I think we should pick this up on this. So I'm about to close. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read two things I got to quickly read. I'll shout out the poll. We'll read this. We'll close it out. We'll prepare
well,
to go to the Discord, and then oh yeah.
we do need to figure out who the author is, though.
Yeah, I
Yes, and then
just
he's
put up
gonna
the
and then he's
last
gonna tell
page.
he's gonna tell up and then he's gonna wrap that up, and then as soon as he's done, we're gonna go to Discord. So if that sounds
Okay.
good to you, if that sounds
Yeah,
if
let's do
that's
it. Let's
okay.
do it.
So first of all, $10 super chat from Isandering Person. Yay! I made some extra money this month, and this seems like a good place to invest it. Well,
I like
I
this
certainly
guy.
appreciate it.
I don't know who he is, but I like this guy.
Oh, he was in. He did the gun discussion that we did, and he's been a long time
Second
supporter of the
Amendment,
show.
right?
Yeah. He was the discussion that we had. This is him. He was. It was a really good discussion. I really enjoyed it.
I actually do like this guy. I didn't realize that I knew him and liked him before that.
Yep, and well, he's been a busy guy, so it's just sometimes we don't get to see him for a while, but he's been back, which we really appreciate. So thank you very much for that super chat. We also had, and then before so the poll, I'll give everyone about 1 more minute left on the poll. The poll question is, and then we'll close it out, and then we'll finish up with this thing. The poll question: can calls for social justice? Can or do calls for social justice diminish free speech? Yes for one. Yes for one. One for yes. Vote 2 for no, or vote 3 for yes, but it's either acceptable or just not a problem for some reason. So we'll close that out in a minute, and then Christopher's going to talk about who authored this piece. But before I close this out, somebody had pointed out that op-ed writer Bari Weiss of the New York Times,
one of the authors,
resigned 2 days ago. Oh, well, there you go. She resigned 2 days ago from the New York Times. She resigned in a letter to the editor. Quote, there is suddenly a great deal of concern being expressed over, quote, cancel culture on the left, generally ignoring that the right has been suppressing dissent and penalizing nonconformity for decades. Still, it cannot be denied that many on the left have adopted an intolerant posture towards those to those in their ranks who deviate from what is currently considered politically correct opinion. Free expression is the centerpiece of liberal politics, and its defense must be a priority. 2 points must be noted. First, it's not bullying or harassment to have people disagree with your opinions or to make the subject of criticism for expressing views, or to be made the subject of criticism for expressing views that others find morally reprehensible. Too often, those who complain about cancel culture seem suspiciously thin-skinned, at least when it comes to their own opinions or to the opinions of those they agree with that come under attack. Second, speech is not violence. Undoubtedly, words can sting. They can be hurtful and offensive. But the best remedy for those wounds inflicted by words consists of words spoken in rebuttal. Barry Weiss was not forced to leave the New York Times. I'm sorry, this is from Stefan. This was not by her. This is a letter to the was not forced to leave the New York Times. She chose to resign in protest. She has chosen to make her resignation an indictment of the Times and its workplace culture. Fair enough, but in the escalating war over cancel culture, there's a danger that both sides seek to stigmatize each other, and this mutual application of tar and feathers will not do cause to the cause of free expression any good at all. She resigned because she said, quote, Twitter has become an editor on the New York Times.
Wow.
Ooh. So she's one of the signatories? I mean, what do they consider not everyone here, and not everyone on this list wrote it, but I think that it was written by a group of people that people signed on to. So this is the full list, and it's just a lot of people. So what I did is I just took the people that I'm familiar with and respect on this list, and I just made a quick slide about that. And then I highlighted the people that I think are super important. Like Ann Applebaum is totally awesome. David Brooks, he's a conservative, but I think that he's smart as fuck. Whoa, what just happened? Noam Chomsky. One more time. There it is. Noam Chomsky, Malcolm Gladwell, the author, I love him. Jonathan Haidt, controversial, but I've loved him from way back. Steven Pinker, same thing. Wynton Marsalis, of all people, jazz trumpeter. Matthew Iglesias, who I believe was also in the New York Times. He might still be. And then Fareed Zakaria. I mean, whatever Fareed says is true. Like, Fareed is my Nick Souter. Fareed doesn't say it didn't happen. And whatever Fareed says does happen.
Okay, that's good to know. I like Fareed. I don't watch much cable news anyway, so I don't. But I mean, I know who he is and I like him. But I'll have to keep that in mind.
Almost every Sunday, I watch Fareed Zakaria just for his. I mean, even though he publishes it in, I think, the Washington Post or the Washington Times earlier in the week, he reads his first 10 minutes of his show is him reading the piece that he wrote earlier in the week, and it's just always so insightful and devastatingly good. And Noam Chomsky, for fuck's sake, I mean, he has an almost complete understanding of socio-political history. Agree with him or not, you know what I mean? Like Noam Chomsky,
you may agree or disagree with his opinions, but he knows what he's talking about. He's studied it. J.K. Rowling. I think
interesting. J.K. Rowling is on there as well, because she's been getting in trouble lately for her opinions on the trans community, I think.
Yeah.
Gloria Steinem, old school feminist. She was the leader of the second wave of feminism.
Yeah.
So now that you've seen the authors, I'm curious to know if anybody's opinion has changed. I think that the illiberalism word, Jonathan Haidt had to have contributed that, because he speaks about that all the time. Illiberalism, anti-fragility, like that just seems like a Jonathan Haidt ism.
All right, well, the poll's back open. We had, we already had 3 votes for yes, 1 vote for no. We'll leave the poll open for a minute, and then we'll wrap this up to the Discord.
Yeah, so anyone who's watching, if you want to talk to us about these topics, because I think we still haven't gotten deep, because to me, talking about cancel culture, there's at least 3 layers, right? There's cancel culture in the public square, in the private square, and specifically colleges. I think that, and I think that it needs to be treated differently. So hopefully that'll be the conversation that spills over into the In Time Discord. But if you're not a member of the In Time Discord, now is your time to become a member, because we're going to be in voice chat and we're just going to be chilling, talking about this stuff for the next 30, 45 minutes. So if you want to talk to us or at us or yell at us about what we talked about today,
you can yell at him.
The In Time Discord server.
I
they can yell at you. I'm just going to sit back and laugh.
I have the mute. Oh, jeez. And that does remind me, the other one that I really want to hit on that we didn't get to, and this could be a whole nother show, is political correctness. Because I think, in my view, now that's a little older now in terms of how, but I think political correctness has been used as a cudgel. And Courtney is the real reason, folks, that Courtney would like to get a cat as a co-host is because it is a violent animal, and when she could just sit there and look, and all of a sudden the cat will go, and you'll see me and my camera will go down and the whole nine. Yeah. It's not pretty.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Political correctness is something that, it's another thing that on its original intent seems very positive, like a positive direction for the world to go in, and then it's kind of mischaracterized as something that's really unfair, usually among the privileged and ignorant. So there's that.
Oh, yeah, I definitely
That's
think
what I
that
would say
PC
to that.
culture is a good intention, bad execution. What are you hiding your face
I mean,
from?
and again,
I think she's referring to me as the privileged and uneducated. I think
everybody thinks that.
Well, I know everybody thinks that. I just thought I was keeping her from it, but apparently she's been talking to people. It doesn't take talking to much, by the way. But it's just.
I don't know. I just don't. I don't like when it's when you make a really good point about that something is problematic, and people parrot that like, oh, PC culture, and like it gets painted as something that's a bad thing, and it's like, I don't know, man.
I think that happens too.
You know what I mean?
No, I do agree that it cuts both ways. I think PC went too far in very much the ways that we're talking about. And I think because it did that, it opened itself up to now anytime anybody's got an objection to something, they can say, oh, you're just being PC. Well, that's actually now meaningless. That's just an objection you can throw out because PC really did go too far. And their point may be good, it may be bad. It has nothing to do with whether PC is good or bad. It's just it's not, but it is a weapon now. Calling something PC is a weapon to discredit something, and that's a problem too.
Especially, I've had that used as a weapon against me a lot, and I'm not, a part of whatever toxic thing has become PC culture. I don't even know what it is, but it's broadened a term that is like demonizing of mindful civil discourse and respect of other people. To me, that's what political correctness is. It's about being politically correct about how you address other people and how you engage in civil discourse with other people. And so when you do that, and when you ask for that from people who are being particularly nasty or saying something that's very outdated or ignorant about a minority, then that's seen as, oh, we can't say anything anymore. Oh, PC culture, and that's what I've seen it be, is used as a weapon against mindfulness of how you address people of lesser status in society than you. I think that's what, to me, that's what that means.
Yeah, and it's almost like political correctness is a goal in a way that treating people with respect is the value. And the difference between goals and values is that you achieve goals and then there's nowhere to go after that. But if you have a value that you're pursuing for the rest of your life, that's kind of like a craft. Yeah. So I think that the piece using political correctness was a tool towards, trying to get people to treat each other with respect. But now it has become, like you had mentioned, weaponized to a point where people think they can just end a conversation by accusing you of fill in the blank. Oh, you don't agree with me? You're a Nazi. You don't agree with me? You're a racist. You don't agree with me? You're blah, right? Whatever the catchphrase is. And it's just like, well, now not only do I have to defend myself against a baseless accusation, I need to backpedal in such a way that I need to go over my argument with a fine-tooth comb to let you know that I'm not the thing that you are. And in doing so, I'm giving you so many hairs to split that I'm defeating myself by just defending myself against a baseless accusation. right? And that changes, like,
Yeah.
when you come into whatever, a conversation, expecting it to be a conversation, and then that's thrown at you, you're just like, we are playing two different games right now, you know?
Right.
Like, it's just
Right.
it's totally different.
We're holding ourselves to two different standards for sure.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, the results of the
All right,
second
we're gonna
poll. Yeah. So
Oh no,
the
we're going to move to Discord.
Yeah, let's do that. So the results of the second poll, I just dropped the Discord link. I'll drop it one more time before we, Tony Designs, only the Sith speak in absolutes. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Is that absolutely true, Tony? Are you telling us something?
That's a really good catch. I'm scared now. I was always a little scared, but now I'm really scared. We're going to have to, okay. All right, we need some more Jedi on the mod list. I'm just saying. I feel.
Well,
social media.
That's Tony. Tony's a Jedi on the streets and a Sith in the sheets, from what I heard.
Oh my God! Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the show has officially gone off the rails. I'm really impressed. It is. I'm calling it. We're 1 hour and 5 minutes and 23 seconds into it. It's official. I had really thought it would happen sooner, so this is probably a record for a Mouty stream in terms of how long we lasted, but it is official. We're done. Thank you all for watching. For the 1,600 of you who just unsubbed and wanted your money back, I do understand, and at this point I'm inclined to give it back to you, quite frankly, because
that's why it's an LLC. What are you talking about?
So what we're going to do is, so it's now the poll, 1 for 1. We still had another vote, once again, for no, social justice does not diminish free speech. And we had a single vote for yes, it does. We will continue this in our Discord. I'll drop the link one more time before the theme music wraps up. Thank you both for joining us. I will be in the Discord in less than 5 minutes. I'm sure Chris will be there pretty soon too. Courtney, are you going to be able to join us, you think, for a little bit?
Yeah. I did have like one clarification from my view real quick.
Yes.
Go, please.
I know we're wrapping up, I know. But it's just that the phrasing of the question, I felt like it would clarify in the paper, but it seems to me like what you said about the difference between a value and a tool toward that value, I feel like social justice is the value, and cancel culture is the tool of it. So I'm not sure that the phrasing of the poll is the right way to phrase it. If we're talking about cancel culture, that's one thing. If we're talking about social justice, that's the ideal that started with, like, you know, abolition, and that's social justice to me. And so I don't know if that would be a more accurate poll to set, because I don't know if I would have been able to answer that poll. But yeah.
And we all know that, you know, polling questions absolutely shape the results of the poll, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Well, yep. I like, if you are bold enough to have me on again, I love this poll idea. I love this idea of getting people's opinions as a baseline and then having a discussion and then doing a post analysis through the poll. So maybe next time we'll spend a little time on the wording of it so that it's more in line and congruent with the topic. But I love the fact that we had it. I mean, no complaints here. Yeah. But you're right. The wording.
Yeah, we'll spend a little more time on it. We'll make sure that everybody's good with it beforehand. I stopped. I was listening to Courtney. Admittedly, I do apologize. I kind of tuned out after she said that Chris was a tool. But
I don't remember that.
She said, I agree, it's a tool, and you know, I was just like, well, yeah, he's a tool. I think you can. Okay, never mind.
Start the music.
All right, ladies and thank you all very much for coming, and we will catch up with you in just a couple of minutes. I don't know.